Welcome to episode 69 of Game of Thrones Abridged on Alt Swift X. Today we are reading Daenerys 9, A Game of Thrones, the 9th Daenerys chapter, the second last in this first book of Game of Thrones. And it begins with wings shadowing Daenerys's fever dream. And Fever Dream, by the way, is the name of one of George Martin's old novels. Was some from like the 80s or something. It's about like vampires and steamboats are the two things that Fever Dream is about. Not the most likely combination of topics, I would say. It's not exactly vampires and werewolves. It's not, it's aristocratic, old-timey vampires on boats going up and down the Mississippi. It's if you're into that sort of thing, if you're into that sort of thing, I'm sure you'd love it. But I didn't get through Fever Dream. I didn't love it that much. But anyway, Daenerys is dreaming feverishly. She's kind of tripping out, to be honest, actually, because she's hearing this voice that says, "You don't want to wake the dragon, do you?" Which is, of course, something that Dany's brother Viserys would say, waking the dragon being his self-aggrandizing metaphor for having a bit of a tanty. When he got a bit upset, when he had a bit of a hissy fit, he would frame his unruly emotions in the terms of a dragon, because that metaphor made his childishness seem more legitimate. But there's also a second sort of meaning to this phrase in this chapter, because it's sort of about Daenerys awakening as a Targaryen, as a dragon, which is a different meaning to the way Viserys used it, except is it, though? Because maybe when Daenerys does embrace her Targaryen, violent, draconic identity, that also involves some of the sort of anger and impulsivity and dangerousness that Viserys Targaryen embodies. So that's sort of what's going on throughout this chapter as we repeat the phrase, "You don't want to wake the dragon, do you?" And Dany's tripping out. She's like imagining that she is walking down a long hall and she's trying to get towards a red door ahead of her. And she walks fast, but the door just seems further and further away, and she must not look back. She must not look behind her. It's like the myth of Orpheus, who went down into the underworld to try and rescue his biddy, and on the way out, there was like a rule that if he looked back at his woman, I can't remember her name, while he left, then something terrible had happened. She turned into a pillar of salt or something. It's like the biblical thing about Lot's wife. She turned into a pillar of salt, didn't she? Because Lot or she or someone looked back, which you must never do in these circumstances. If ever you're leaving the underworld, having a fever dream, any kind of phantasmagorical, ephemeral sort of a situation, just remember not to look back. I'm not sure why that's the rule, to be honest. I mean, usually looking back implies looking at the danger that's behind you, right? Dany here is running away from something. Why is it dangerous for her to look at the danger? Is there something scary about the danger? If you look at the danger, will you be unable to look away? Is that what it's implying? I'm not really sure, but the point is that Dany's having a nightmare where she's trying to run towards the red door. The red door, of course, represents sort of home and happiness and safety. There was a house with a red door in Bravos that Dany stayed in for a while, which to her represented sort of safety and calm and sort of the good life. And so she's trying to strive towards this vision of home, but never quite reaches it in her dream. She goes on to dream about Drogo, her husband Drogo, and the Dothraki Sea. And she thinks of Drogo holding her in his strong arms and stroking her sex and having sex with her, and filling her with his seed. And so she's fondly remembering her intimacy with Drogo as sort of another representation of home and the thing that she wants. But of course, at the same time, Drogo is something that's being taken from her, right? Because if you remember last Daenerys chapter, Dany tried to sort of strike a deal with the devil, so to speak, and try to perform a ritual with Mirri Maz Duur to restore Drogo to health, because he lost a tit. Remember, Drogo suffered a wound on his breast, that festered because he didn't follow Miri Mazda's instructions. And then Dany's like, do some sick magic Wingardium Leviosa to wake him back up again. And then Jorah carried the pregnant Dany into the tent while they were doing the magical jitsus. And now Dany's tripping to the fucking sky and back, man. She's in the stratosphere. It's getting pretty heavy. And she dreams of great wings and the world taking flame. You don't want to wake the dragon, do you? It repeats. So there's dragon imagery, dragons rising, dragons being born, because of course next chapter, Daenerys' dragons will hatch. And yeah, the dark is behind her, and the red door seems further away than ever. And Viserys, she dreams of Viserys screaming about all of his ridiculous shit that he screams about. I am the dragon. You do not control the dragon. And then he has the melted gold trickle down his face. And the red door. She's running for the red door, and she feels the icy breath behind her. So that's interesting, isn't it? That the darkness, the evil that Dany is running away from is icy, which is connected to the White Walkers and the others. In fact, it also sort of connects to like Bran's vision when he looks far above and he looks beyond and he looks into the heart of winter, and we don't get a description of what the heart of winter looks like exactly. But it seems to be something fucking terrible because it like wakes Bran up out of his nightmare or something, doesn't it? So like, maybe that's part of why Dany can't look back in this situation. Maybe it's the heart of winter that's behind her, or something similar, or something connected. This dream of Dany's is actually quite similar to Bran's vision, actually. The one where Bloodraven tries to open his third eye and stuff. We'll note more similarities later. But for now, like, yeah, she's been chased by the icy breath, and she feels a heat inside of her. And for a moment, she has a vision of her son Rhaego, who she was pregnant with until recently. And she has a vision of what Rhaego will or would have been like as an adult. So he's got like the copper skin of Drogo and the silver gold hair of Daenerys, eyes shaped like almonds and colored violet. So a combination of the Targaryen, Valyrian, and Dothraki traits. But then this vision of her son is consumed by flame, consumed like a moth by a candle, and turned to ash. Because Rhaego has, of course, died. Rhaego has died before he lived, as we'll have described later. And then, as she's running down the hallway towards the red door, she sees these visions of these blonde blokes cheering for her. Blonde people with purple eyes and golden hair, and it's the Targaryen kings. It seems to be. Dany's having a vision of bloody Aegon the Unworthy and Jaehaerys and Maegor and all of the Targaryen kings cheering Dany on. You go, girl, as she does the 100-meter dash towards the red door. So she's imagining all of her Targaryen heritage, cheering her on in her phantasmagorical spirit quest that's going on here. And then Daenerys opens her wings, and Daenerys Targaryen flies. So that's very similar to Bran's vision, which ends with Bran flying. In this case, Dany is flying as a dragon. She's opening her Targaryen identity, and all that entails. And she imagines herself flying across the Dothraki Sea, and she smells home, and she's flying towards home. So this whole flying concept to Bran is obviously very connected to like green sight and like seeing through the weirwood trees and walking and all of those associated powers, whereas flying for Daenerys doesn't seem to have those connotations necessarily. If you want to get all tinfoily, like, oh, maybe Bloodraven is involved in this vision somehow. I don't think he is, though. But it certainly represents something sort of magical and mystical, and certainly a connection to her Targaryen identity, because she imagines her brother Rhaegar, her older brother Rhaegar, with his helmet on, and then he takes the helmet off, and behind Rhaegar's helmet is Daenerys's face, which is like what happens in Empire Strikes Back. Right, where like Luke has a vision of himself dueling his father Vader, and then he cuts off his head, and then under Vader's mask, it was Luke's face all along. So that has all these like connotations of like, oh, will Luke move to the dark side? And it also hints at Luke's like familial relationship to Darth Vader. Although in this case, I suppose the implications aren't quite so much. It just, I think, implies a connection between Dany and Rhaegar, and perhaps it implies that Dany, like Rhaegar, will die. I guess that's also a possibility. And then Dany experiences pain and fire, and then she wakes to the taste of ashes. And then Jiqui, her handmaiden, who's like hanging out next to her, is like, "Whoa, Khaleesi is awake. Shit." And she sort of scampers off. And Dany's like, "Wow, man, I had the trippiest dream, man. I was like a dragon, and you were there, and you were there." And her body really hurts, probably because she's just given birth. But she doesn't quite remember that she's given birth right now. Dany thinks that she needs something. She needs someone. What? So Dany's struggling to remember the fact that she had a son. She was pregnant. She gave birth, but she doesn't seem to quite remember that right now, which is another interesting parallel to Bran's vision with Bloodraven and opening the third eye. Because remember, Bran lost memories when Bloodraven pecked away his memory of Jaime Lannister throwing him from a tower. There was memory loss associated with that flying dream, and now Dany's had a flying dream, and she's also sort of seemed to have forgotten about the fact that she was just in the process of giving birth. So that's interesting as well. But yeah, so she's sort of freaked out. The world's swimming. She's sort of delirious, and they find her on the carpet, crawling towards her dragon eggs. She has this need to be near her dragon eggs at the moment, which recurs in the chapter. But Ser Jorah comes along and says, "You need a fucking chill, mate. You need a rest. You need to get your HP back up. So go back to sleep." And she does. Miri Maz-Dur comes along. So Miri Maz-Dur is looking after her, despite Miri Maz-Dur's role in all of the dark magic shit that just happened. Miri Maz-Dur comes and gives us some like milk of the poppy or something. And sleep takes Dany, and this time she does not dream. And then after a long time, she sleeps for a long time, and then she wakes up again, and all her handmaidens are around her, Irri and Jiqui and Doria. These guys are like hella loyal, by the way. They're still with her in like book 5. I think Doria dies, I think. But Irri and Jiqui, at least, are still, these Dothraki handmaidens are still chilling with Dany and Meereen by book 5. Whereas in the show, like, they die in like season 2, 3, when like, because I think Jiqui or Irri Doria goes over to the Zarozo and Daxos and gets locked into the tomb, and Irri gets murdered in that deleted scene or something, right? Great, whatever. But in the books, like, they're still alive. They are very loyal to Daenerys. But anyway, Dany's like, she's sort of delirious again, and she's like, "Oh, I need water. How long was I out?" And then Miri Maz-Dur comes and gives her some fucking potion, and then Dany keeps going, "Oh, I need my dragon egg. I need my dragon egg," and they give her the dragon egg, and it's got scales the color of buttercream. Because George Martin will find a way to put a food description even into a description of an egg. It is a bit silly, isn't it? The way the dragon eggs in Game of Thrones look like they have scales and they're colored the color of the dragon inside. I mean, that's a bit silly, isn't it? What is this? A fantasy book? What is this? Magic? What is this? You gonna tell me there's gonna be zombies next? Huh. That's what I have to say about fantasy. But there's a dragon egg. She's loving it. Dragon dew, she thinks. She looks at her sweaty body and she thinks dragon dew, because the Targaryens can't go 5 minutes before putting dragon as the prefix before something. Dragon lords, dragon riders, dragon stone, dragon glass, dragon cup, dragon tea, dragon hat, dragon feet. Everything's dragon something with these wankers. She even thinks her own sweat is dragon dew. You could like bottle it and sell it as a cure-all, as a snake oil. Dragon dew. It's full of antioxidants. It'll cure all your ills. Just for 250 bottle caps, I'll give you a big old bottle of dragon dew to cure your eczema and your emphysema. Line up here to buy more. That's what Daenerys says, and then she feels something twisting and stretching inside the egg. So the eggs are supposedly paralyzed and empty and dead, but Dany senses life inside. And next chapter they will hatch. And then Dany says, I want Ser Jorah. Dany, of course, at this point has not found out that Jorah is feeding information to Varys, is betraying her. So she relies on Jorah a lot. And yeah, Dany's like, I need Jorah and I need a warm bath, in that order. And then she goes, and then all of a sudden memory comes back to her. And she says, hold on a minute. I have a husband. Khal Drogo, how's he doing? Let's catch up with Khal. What's the status report on situation Drogo? And then Eerie says, well, he is alive. And then Dany's like, oh, fuck, what? And Eerie's like, he is alive. And Dany sees a darkness in her eyes. So she knows that something's up with Drogo. And she asks Doria, but she doesn't answer. She's just like, oh, I'll just go and get Ser Jorah. But Dany grabs her by the wrist, grabs Jeekwe and says, look, tell me, I need to know what the fuck is up. What's up with my husband? And what's up with my child? And she thinks, why had I not remembered the child until now? There's definitely some weird sort of memory shenanigans going on. She just remembers that she had just given birth, and she's like, well, my child, Rhaego, my son, is he okay? And then the handmaid, Jeekwe, says, he's dead. Rhaego did not live. My son is dead, Dany thinks, and she had known somehow. She did dream. She remembers her dream of the tall man with the copper skin bursting into flame, and she had known that Rhaego was dead. And she should weep, but she does not. She has no tears left because the fire burned all of the grief out of her. All the emotion has been sort of wiped out of her. All of that dreaming of the dragon spreading its wings in the flame, she's been filled with some kind of purpose and determination right now. So she does not spend time grieving for her unborn son. And then she touches her dragon eggs and they feel hot to her. Which she thinks is a bit odd. And later, Jorah touches the egg and he's like, "No, this is a cold egg, mate. This is an omelet ready to be made, man." But Dany's like, "No, there's fire inside. There's something alive." So more hints that the eggs are gonna hatch soon. And then Dany's like, "What the fuck's up with my son, Rhaego?" And then Jorah says that your son never lived. Sorry. And he sort of falters and he sort of stumbles. And his flesh hangs loose. He looks a bit unwell. He probably hasn't been eating much. He's a bit low on the proteins. He looks half a corpse. In fact, he's looking quite unwell. He was wounded, wasn't he? He was wounded by that Dothraki he fought before. So maybe that's part of why Jorah looks bad. But Mirri Maz Dur steps in and she's like, Your son was monstrous. He was scaled like a lizard. He had the stub of a tail. He had wings like the wings of a bat. The flesh just slid right off him, and underneath it was just maggots and worms and stink and rot. He'd been dead for years. And Dany's like, what the fuck are you talking about? He's dead for years. I felt him kicking in my belly just a bit before I gave birth. But she realizes that, Mirri Maz Dur's like, death was the price for life. You know the deal, man, that we just struck. You wanted Drogo alive, and I told you that that'd be a death. And Dany's like, I thought the horse was the payment. I thought the life of the horse. But Mirri Maz Dur's like, no. It was the baby. You knew it was the baby, Rhaego. That was the deal all along. Dany also thinks for a while that it's Jorah's fault. Jorah killed Rhaego because Jorah carried Dany into the tent while Mirri Maz Dur was performing the ritual. But that seems to be contradicted by this idea that no, that the deal all along was for Rhaego to die so that Drogo could live. And so Dany suddenly realizes that, Mirri Maz Dur is actually, I thought she was just this homely, nice old lady. She's actually a fucking blood mage, mate. She's a dark-ass sorcerer. This is some hard shit. This isn't your, gateway magic card tricks. This is, hard, tough as nails, fucking injected into the eyeballs, A-grade blood magic. Mirri Maz Dur is, woo, top grade heavy shit in terms of the sorcery. And she's a dangerous woman. And she's cruel and she's strong, Dany thinks. And so Dany's like, all right, fucking fine. All right, that was a bargain. Then show me what I bought. Show me what I bought for my son's life. And so Miriam Esther's like, all right, follow me. I'll show you what you bought. I'll show you how Drogo is. And they go outside, and outside the tent is blindingly light. Danny hasn't been outside for a while. Needs to get some vitamin D, some vitamin Drogo, if you know what I mean. And the sun is burning like molten gold. And of course, it's interesting that, Drogo, in his little sort of cute poetic pet names that he and Danny had, my sun and stars, my moon of my life. Drogo was the sun in that analogy, right? And here we have the sun beating down fiercely and heating everyone up. The sun is strong, while Drogo, in this metaphor, is actually not, as we soon see. But the Khalasar, by the way, has sort of left. Drogo's Khalasar has broken up into a bunch of other Khalasars. Everyone's left and gone home because a Khal who cannot ride cannot rule. He is no Khal. So Drogo's great Khalasar, his great community, his followers have abandoned him because he's sick and weak and dying. And yeah, so they describe like the breakup of the Dothraki. They were like fighting and stuff when the Khalasars split up. And they talk about Ero. How do you pronounce that? Eroi? Ero? Ero was like this girl, this child who Danny saved in the city of the Lazarene. Saved her from being raped and took her into her service. But we hear that during the breakup of Drogo's Khalasar, Margot and Khal Joko raped her, and yeah, lots of raping, and then after that they cut her throat. So this innocent girl who Danny had tried to protect was brutally mistreated and murdered by Khal Joko and Margot. And so Danny immediately goes, you know what? I swear by every god on the goddamn earth, I swear by the mother of the mountain of the mountains and all of that, I swear that Margot and Khal Joko will plead for the mercy that they showed this girl that they raped and killed. And the Dothraki are like, you're not really in a position to be making anyone plead for mercy right now, mate. And Danny's like, nah, fuck you. I am Daenerys Stormborn. I am the blood of the conqueror, and I swear to you, those men will die screaming. So she sort of she says it. I mean, she's fiery, is I suppose how you would describe that. I mean, she's just had this dream of waking the dragon, right? She's just had this dream of a Targaryen identity spreading its wings, and I think this is how it expresses itself. All this talk of like being the dragon, it means fiery, terrible, violent consequences to the people who do wrong to Dany and her people. So that's the fire and blood that we've all been talking about. Dany swears that she will make Margot and Joko scream. And it looks like that opportunity may actually arise in the books, because in book 5, Daenerys is, having another sort of vision quest, spirit quest thing going on in the Dothraki Sea with her dragon Drogon, and she actually bumps into the Khalasar of Khal Joko. So this guy who left her husband's Khalasar and who murdered her woman Ero. That bloke bumps into Daenerys and her dragon at the end of A Dance with Dragons. So it looks like Khal Joko may get his comeuppance indeed, in the books at least. Which might go down similarly to how it went down in Game of Thrones Season 6, because remember, all of those Dothraki Khals were roasted alive in Vaes Dothrak in Season 6. So maybe something somewhat similar will happen in the books. But anyway, so they go and see Khal Drogo, what Dany bought with the life of her son, and they see him lying on the bare red earth staring at the sun, and there's flies all over his body, and he doesn't respond. Remember how we had that description of Drogo swatting flies out of the air like a fucking Shaolin monk? He's now totally unresponsive. He seems to be blind. He does not seem to hear. He's got a terrible scar. And Jorah describes his condition. He says that, well, Drogo can sort of walk if you lead him around. He'll eat if you put food in his mouth, but he doesn't really do anything. So Dany goes, man, this is like fucked up. Like this is not a good condition. Amir Mazdaz's like, he's alive. You asked me to make him alive, and he's alive. And Dany's like, this is not fucking life. He's not laughing. He's not eating. He's not smiling. He's not fighting. He's not fucking. This is not Drogo, man. And Dany's like, when's he going to be better? When's he going to be like he was before? And Miri says, Drogo will be better when the sun rises in the west and sets in the east, when the mountains blow in the wind like leaves, when your womb quickens again and you bear a living child. So some people think there's like another prophecy. You know, there's something that'll actually happen, but I don't expect the mountains to blow in the wind or the seas to go dry anytime soon. I think this is meant to mean never, which is interesting in its implication that Dany will never bear a living child. That has big political connotations, right? Because Dany's goal is to establish a Targaryen dynasty once again. How is she going to do that if she can't have children? That's a pretty big flaw. If you're trying to establish a feudal dynasty, you need chidlers, and you can't make chidlers without a functioning uterus. That's just the way it is in this world, eh? So that's a bit of a problem, isn't it? How's Dany going to continue the line? Maybe we're going to have to find some other solution. Some people do point out that at the end of A Dance with Dragons, Dany seems to have a miscarriage, or she has a period again for the first time in ages or something. There's some kind of menstrual activity, which some people take to mean that Dany might actually be fertile again. But that would be a bit weird, because Mirri Maz Duur seems to state pretty categorically that ain't going to happen. So we'll just have to wait and see, perhaps. And then Dany turns on Mirri, and she's like, man, this is fucked. This is a bad deal, and you know it. I didn't want Drogo to be a vegetable. I didn't want to give up my son for a vegetable. She doesn't use that exact word. But this is not cool, bruh. And then Mirri says, you want to talk about not cool, mate? I'll tell you about not cool. Your people, Khal Drogo's Dothraki, burned my temple. You guys destroyed my community. Like that's fucked up if you want to talk about fucked up. And then Mirri's like, look, I did a good thing by having your son Rhaego die, because Rhaego was supposedly the prophesied stallion who'll mount the world, right? The prophecy was that he would conquer the world and trample cities into dust. I saved those cities. I saved those people by killing Rhaego. So don't talk to me about what's fucking good and bad. I'm in the right here, mate, Mirri Maz Duur says. But and Dany's like, aren't you fucking grateful after all I did for you? I saved you. I saved you, man. Because, of course, remember, Dany did save Mirri Maz Duur from rape and slavery. She took her into her service. And Mirri Maz Duur's like, no, man, that means nothing. Like, what did you save, really? Like, when you saved me, I'd already been raped a bunch of times. My whole community had already been destroyed. My temple had been burned down. I was a doctor, right? And all the kids and the families and the people who I put all this effort into healing and helping, your people killed them and sent them into slavery and raped them and did terrible things. You took everything from me. So tell me what you saved. And Dany says, your life. I saved your life. And Mirri Maz Duur says, well, look at Drogo and tell me what life is worth when all the rest is gone. Which is pretty powerful, I think. It's pretty well illustrated that yes, you know, there's more to life than having a fucking functioning respiratory system. You can live and breathe and beat your heart, but that's not life. Life is having a community and connections and aspirations and goals and gods and something, meaning. You know, when that's taken away, it doesn't do you much good to be alive, to be breathing and heart beating. And so Mirri Maz Duur elegantly and cruelly drives her point home by saying that, well, we're just as good as Drogo after you've taken everything from us. And so Dany's like, all right, go lock her up, take Mirri Maz Duur, bind her head to fate. But Mirri just smiles at her because you know, it's part of her point. Like, you can take me prisoner, you can take my head off, you can kill me, but I've already lost everything. There's nothing more that you can take from me. So Mirri is not afraid of Dany anymore. And so Dany's like, wow, that sucks. And then she takes Drogo, the vegetable Drogo, and bathes him and washes his hair. And spends a whole bunch of time looking after his unresponsive body, and then she tries to eat and chill out for a bit, and then she's like, all right, how am I gonna come to terms with Drogo's condition? She thinks about what Drogo was like before. She thinks about the first time they had sex together and how the Dothraki believe that all things of importance in a man's life must be done out beneath the open sky. And Dany tells herself that there are some powers stronger than hatred, some spells truer and older than any that Mirri Maz Duur had learned. I'm going to fight back against Drogo's terrible condition with the TM power of love. The power of love is what Dany decides to use. And so she decides that she's going to fuck Drogo better, basically, is Dany's plan. Dany decides to make love to the unresponsive Drogo in order to heal him. So she's not really capable of penetrative sex given the fact that she's just given birth. She's feeling a bit, quote, raw and torn. But she instead uses all other parts of her body. She rakes him with her nails, covers him with kisses. She uses her hands, her mouth, her breasts, her elbow, the bit in between her big toe, her cuticles, her nostrils. She's just going to town. It's like that scene in Team America. She has really intense sex with this unresponsive vegetable, and when that doesn't work, she whispers and prays, and she tells him stories, and she does everything she can to get some kind of emotional, physical, intimate connection with Drogo, something to wake him out of his state. But Drogo does not feel, and he does not speak, and he does not respond to Dany's pleas. And that's when Dany realizes that Drogo is truly lost. And so Dany goes and gets a pillow, and she puts it over Drogo's head until he suffocates and dies. And Daenerys' husband and first love is dead by her hands. And that's the end of that chapter. So that's upsetting. Fuck. But there are some lessons to learn from that, right? So I mean, in another story, in let's say an episode of Doctor Who, the power of love would have succeeded, right? Dany's tears, the tears that are brimming with emotion and love for her dead Drogo, would have landed onto Drogo's face, and then there would have been some little CGI pixie dust, glowing, shining light, and then Drogo would have opened his eyes and said, "I am back, my moon of my life," and then they would have been back together and lived happily ever after. Game of Thrones is not a world where the power of love works, and I'm glad it's not. The power of love is such a irritating, overused cliche at this point. I mean, maybe it's all right in the right context, but it just feels like a cop-out, doesn't it? I mean, especially in like a sci-fi Doctor Who is so guilty of I remember there was one episode where there was the Cybermen are doing cyber things, and there's this bloke who's got like this baby. I don't think the Doctor was even like in this episode. There was like this ginger bloke running around with a baby that he loves, and then the baby gets Cyberman or something, and the guy's about to get converted into I am cyber. Oh shit! I think I've actually got something for that. Where is it? Is it how do I make it? Oh, I am cyber. I am Cyberman. I'm doing the thing. I am Doctor Who. The only thing that can defeat the Robo-Man is the power of love. That's what happens in the Doctor Who episode. The robots are being all like, I am Robot Man, and then the Doctor, and then the Ginger's like, it's the power of love, and then all of the light shines out of the metal, and then it splits in two, and then by the power of his emotion, by the power of his belief in the power of love, the robots get defeated, and he saves the day, and it's just fucking boring, like bright lights and lots of feels. He had so many feels. He couldn't hold all his feels, and that's why he won, and it's just dull. This Game of Thrones is not a world in which that happens. Game of Thrones is not a world in which the power of love overcomes evil. In actual fact, magic will fuck your shit up, really. Because Dany came in here with like this fucking Faustian bug, and she was trying to make a deal with the devil. She was like, man, I know that Miri's a bit of a witch, but that's all right. As long as she can bring back my husband, it's fine. And she traded her baby, and what she got was no baby and no husband. So magic fucked her over, which is why it's interesting that next chapter Dany like double or nothing down, because she does more magic. She does the gambit again by going into the pyre with the eggs and Miri Mazdur, which is what causes the dragons to hatch. So after magic fucks Dany over once, she just tries again. She tries her luck again at the roulette wheel, and this time, spoiler, it goes better for her. Well, that's an interesting chapter, if only for sort of establishing the groundwork of the way magic works here. Magic can and will fuck you up in Game of Thrones, and no amount of love can undo that. Love means something. Love drives these characters. Love is a big deal, but it doesn't undo tragedy, sadly, just as it doesn't in the real world. So on that profoundly depressing note, let's conclude this episode of Game of Thrones Abridged on Alt Swift X. Hope you enjoyed. I have heard that some of you are getting a little nutty in the absence of having withdrawal symptoms of Alt Swift X. Hang on there. Cling on. It's gonna be all right. There's gonna be more episodes. The goal is to complete this first book of Game of Thrones around the time that Game of Thrones season 7 completes. We'll attempt for sort of semi-weekly episodes, and I think it's gonna be a good time. So do have a lovely week, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.